So yesterday I talked about Marty Isenberg, who did a panel and talked about a whole bunch of stuff that was going to be used for a potential season 4 of Transformers Animated. And that got a lot of attention all over the internet, especially in the Transformers community, because Animated was a much beloved Transformers series, and its timing also was quite impeccable because it was the first new Transformers series after the boom of interest in Transformers after the 2007 movie. So not even Transformer fans are crazy about this series. Even fans that weren't of Transformers, this was their first TV take of Transformers, and so this got a lot of attention, a lot of news, and now it seems that after Marty did that panel, there's even more than we thought before. More meets the eye? I don't know. I don't want to do that joke. So here's all the bullet points of it, and I'll give my take on it. And this is some more interesting stuff and stuff that I've heard from Derek in the past talk about. But let's just jump right into it. So the first thing they mention here is Powermaster Optimus Prime was a Hasbro request to allow Hasbro to release a larger sized figure and or price point. Marty also worked on this. Now, that's also interesting because the animated line, when you compare it to a lot of others, was, and I mean, to a credit to Animated, Animated had a really good scale across the line. Like, everything kind of worked in scale with each other's. Yeah, there was the odd legend scale, and they did their flip changer stuff, too, to have a little extra price point of simplicity. But if you really look across the line, it's a bunch of deluxes and a bunch of Voyagers, and 1 or 2 or 3 leaders for bigger characters, but that was really it. And they really stayed in scale with each other. When you look at, say, the likes of the series after that of Transformers Prime, and everyone has a price point, and everything is kind of all over the place, and then you look at that of even, say, the stuff that was going on at the same time with the movie, Animated just had this amazing way of just kind of having a really in-scale price point. The only exception of that rule being they had that rollout Optimus Prime that was that big, beefy, supreme scale kind of Optimus. And then, of course, they had like the gimmicky, like, Bumblebee one there and those bumpin' battlers. But as a mainline transforming figure thing, really good scale. So I guess this was their way to go, well, how do we make more leader classes, or in this case, even a supreme scale figure that isn't just a gimmick? And I guess that's what the Powermaster Prime was going to be. Kind of like, I guess the way I compare it to is how Beast Wars was for years, and then they had that one supreme, I guess we'll call it a supreme scale, with Optimal Optimus. That was like that one final big leader figure. So, I mean, that's pretty cool to read about that. Next thing it says here, Hasbro also requested flames on Optimus due to the movie style. This would be a repaint of the toy. It popped up on the outlines to signify a high honor awarded to Optimus. I find this funny because this is kind of like similar to how in the Allspark Almanac there was the mention that Hot Rod or Rodimus had the flame on his chest because it was the flame of valor. So I'm pretty sure, the flame idea, I guess, within the animated continuity is a signification of some kind of, honor or some kind of medal of honor or something like that. And again, to work in what was going on because, hey, movies were hot. Straight off of 2007, 2009 was going to be Revenge of the Fallen, which probably would have fallen into when season 4 was happening. So you have something like, movies hot. A lot of people identify with Optimus having flames on his design because of the movie. New audience, might as well make it match with what's going on with the movie continuity in terms of a visual style, and we have Optimus with flames. So that's a pretty cool idea, and again, makes sense from a business standpoint, really, and to kind of freshen up the product because you want to have Optimus with a new design and a new look instead of having the same design over a span of seasons. I mean, hey, Beast Wars did the same thing. We got a lot of new designs for almost every character as the seasons continued. Next thing they mention here, a focus would have been on Minicons, but the other Decepticons would eventually come back too. That's funny because that almost kind of relates to what RID 2.0, like the new RID kind of did, where Minicons started to become a thing. But again, you want to freshen up the concept. You're going into the 4th wave and 5th wave of toy lines. You want to, make sure Walmart and at the time Toys R Us has something fresh and new. So, introducing Minicons as a play pattern, hey, it works out, makes sense for me. Next thing here was Megatron was completely losing it at this point in the story, described as not quite Beast Machine's genocidal, but on his way there. Hey, sure, okay, that's kind of cool with me. I mean, from the previous segment we talked about in terms of this, it sounded like he was already killing his own men for the sake of his own success, so kind of makes sense. Then we have here Marauder Megatron, which was the prototype toy that we never got that had that Beast Machine's helmet kind of look. Was a Hasbro request. They wanted a triple changer design, intended to make Megatron a huge threat to the point that he didn't need minions. That's kind of cool. And again, that's almost what Beast Machines was there was the generals, there was drones, but it all centered around Megatron pulling the strings of everything and being the end-all be-all in a lot of ways. It's kind of funny, you know, when you look at it, it's like, I mean, Beast Machines in a lot of ways is the season 4 of Beast Wars, and it kind of goes in that route, being the season 4 of animated. The writers never figured out where they were going with Sari, but her journey and her story in Transformers Animated and the ideas would finally end with that season. So they still didn't really know where they wanted to go with her, but it probably would have ended that season. Here's one that I remember talking with Derek Wyatt about, and it's mentioned here too. Beachcomber was intended for season 3. He was supposed to be caught checking Long Arm transforming into Shockwave, and his reaction would have been, "Dude, not cool." And then Shockwave would kill him. This was cut from the series due to time. But if that was the case, it would have been intended then for season 4, and Blackout would have been the one who killed him. The reason for that and the emphasis on that was if he wouldn't have died in season 4, then it would have been season 5. And it mentions here that Marty really didn't like the character of Beachcomber, which is funny because Derek Wyatt also mentioned many times to me that he never liked the character of Beachcomber, which is funny because, like, I like Beachcomber, and I don't know, I'm pretty sure some people share the same. I mean, I always feel you need to have all kinds of different people in the Transformers universe, and the stoner 60s hippie. I mean, I just kind of dig it. You know, I always kind of dig it. I mean, blue dune buggy, mini bot. I mean, there's nothing really offensive to me about that, but I mean, Derek and I guess it sounds here Marty just really didn't like that character and wanted to kill him off any chance they got. Another thing mentioned here, Unicron considered, quote, too big for animated. I understand what they were going with that, and I remember Derek mentioning that if they did do Unicron, the idea would be and I mentioned it in the last segment, there would be a time travel episode where they go to an apocalyptic future where Unicron had already destroyed Cybertron, sucked it dry, and it was just an empty husk at that point, a la Galactus almost. And it would just have Galvatron being the ruler of a dead planet and Rodimus being the last of the Primes or the last of the Magnuses. You know, an idea that never got fleshed out. So it's something that if Unicron would have been in it, it would have been something in mention only, not in visual or shown ever, really. Because again, like they said here, too big for animated. No plans to have Megatron become Galvatron in animated. Again, the mention was that, you know, you'd have this character of Galvatron in a future and not knowing, is he Megatron, is he not? It's just, here's this dark future. There's this leader named Galvatron, and Rodimus is the last of the Magnuses or the Primes. So again, an idea that never really panned out. Shattered Glass episode was intended for season 3, but got bumped when season 3's opener was made into a 3-parter. We talked about it before also in the previous segment. Shattered Glass was something that was on the table. We got a lot of that in supplemental material throughout the years, but would have been something that would have came up here maybe in season 4 or even season 5. Marty doesn't remember who would have been on Slipstream's own team of Decepticons. Again, Slipstream was kind of have her own Seeker team, but when you kind of look at the new series Cyberverse and how Slipstream has her own Seeker team, kind of gives you an idea maybe of how it would have been in a lot of ways. You know, it's funny with Transformers. A lot of ideas that get nixed or canned in previous series, they still show up in the future in some shape or form, so you always get your answers sooner or later. Optimus as a young leader was Marty's idea. He loves writing the underdog characters and characters of that kind of trait, and sometimes would prove rather interesting compared to the big hero types. Again, everyone loves that. I think that's what lends to, let's say, Optimus Primal's popularity in Beast Wars, is that sometimes the underdog leaders or the young leaders are the more interesting characters. I know it is in my case with Roddy. Blitzwing as a character was born from Marty Isenberg wanting to write a character that turned into anything. Because that didn't work as a toy, Derek Wyatt suggesting using a triple changer character like the character's origin. Marty came up with 3 personalities. Derek Wyatt was inspired by the He-Man character Man-E-Faces, which, I mean, if anyone who knows the Man-E-Faces toy or the character has the spinning faces and the different faces, much like that of Blitzwing in animated. His in-show origin would involve Black Arachnia and would be told in season 4. Again, Black Arachnia tied to a lot of characters that weren't the traditional kind of Transformers, whether it be beasts or otherwise. So that would have been explained in season 4. Shame we never got that. There's a running joke about having a Transformer character named Tractor, and it would have been an Energon farmer. That probably would have been in relation to also Bulkhead, because Bulkhead was a farmer in his previous life, so that probably would have came up at some point. Blur was not intended to come back. He was gone and dead as far as Marty was concerned, but the Bakhan story, which is now considered canon, brought him back. So Marty's like, sure, why not? We would have brought him back then in some shape or form then. Team Char was not specifically planned to be used, nor a story built around them, but Marty thinks they would have been inevitable to use sooner or later because of the characters and toys that would have probably came from it. Then we have here Ratchet probably would have ran off with Omega Supreme as the Ark. Nobody else knew rather than him being intentionally given to by Optimus. Again, it's more just, the old saying with TV tropes, like, putting a character on the bus to kind of put it out of the way, because Omega would have been like one of these big crazy characters. And with, we said before, where now he's stuck in the Ark mode and stuff like that, kind of a way to write him out of the show, and same thing with Ratchet, to focus on newer characters and stuff like that. The character of Red Alert and Rodimus would have been reoccurring characters, Red Alert obviously being made a female in this version, and so, adding a female character to the cast, which would have been pretty cool to just, balance it out a little bit now that, let's say, the likes of Ratchet isn't part of it, so you could have Red Alert into it. And Rodimus being a regular, I'm down for that. And that makes me wonder, would they have brought Judd Nelson back full-time to voice Rodimus? That's a really interesting question, especially at that time when he was just getting his feet wet with voice acting. Now he's pretty common with voice acting, but just back then even. Marty thinks his Obsidian treatment might have been a slip on his part, and it probably was Stryka in the final cut. Now, this is, again, something I mentioned in the previous segment. Originally, there was going to be Obsidian and Stryka, but he thinks that maybe Obsidian was never in the cards and it was just supposed to be Stryka, and there weren't going to be a reunion in a lot of ways of the original generals from Beast Machines. There was no plans for more flying Autobots. The human villains were also something that were going to be phased out. There was no pushback from Hasbro because obviously, if you use human villains, you don't make toys really. So it was just, they just felt like, I think it's time to focus more on Cybertron and robots instead of the human element. The time slot, which originally was used by the Unicron trilogy of Armada, Energon, and Cybertron, and of course animated season 1, 2, and 3, was based on the deal for season 4. The first one, at that time slot, if the ratings were not good, it would have been moved to an earlier time slot. So if season 4 would have continued, it would have stayed in the original time slot, and then its future would have been determined by its ratings if it would have went into season 5. Cartoon Network wanted Marty and the crew to age up the story for season 3 and into season 4 to reflect what was going on with some of their other shows in a similar time slot, that of Ben 10 and the Star Wars Clone Wars. Again, I dig that too, just like how Beast Wars really was toyetic in season 1, and by season 2 and 3, it was more aged up. I could see the same thing here with animated. It grows with your audience. If you were, 5 to 7, and then you were with animated those 3 to 5 years, now you're in your teens or you're in your early teens, your tweeners, as some people like to call it. So you want to age the series up with those fans. Bulkhead was the first character designed by Derek Wyatt. That's something I think we all knew. I remember Derek mentioned it a few times and how it was inspired by a character from a very obscure 80s cartoon called Mighty Orbots, and the character of Wrench. I mean, if you see the character of Wrench, just watch the Mighty Orbots opening, and you'll see like some inspiration right there from Transformers Animated's opening, not to mention the character of Wrench that really is just a dead ringer for Bulkhead. Chances of seeing a new season, unfortunately, are slim to none, although comics are a smaller investment, but it's up to IDW if they want to do this. Marty would be happy to write it. And I mean, that's what I've always felt would be the future for animated, and it has been in a lot of ways. It's been the written word and the printed form rather than that of animation. And I mean, they say slim to none, but I always feel that in an age of Netflix and smaller run stuff, I say never, but I do feel that comic books would be the more realistic choice. Marty was a comic book writer for years, so it just seems like a more natural progression for him. And I think that IDW might want to dip their foot into it and see what they'd be interested in doing with it. Hey, they could do another 4-issue limited. If it does well, they could do something that could be potentially an ongoing. And the last thing that Marty says here, if you want to know more, probably your best bet would be just to check out the Allspark Almanacs. And yeah, while, some creators of the show have said in the past that the Allspark Almanac does some stuff that they wouldn't have done, but all in all, it kind of gives you a good supplemental for the show if you want answers that weren't originally answered originally. I mean, the whole thing with the Flame of Valor and Rodimus's chest, only from the Allspark Almanac you really find that out. So, and it's, there's little tweaks here and there. And I know that if you get, because you have the Allspark Almanac Part 1 and 2, and then they had the combine of both of them, which I'm trying to look here from my shelving. It was called the Complete Allspark Almanac, that one, because I have this individual ones and I have the complete one on my bookshelf here. So the complete one, the thing about that is there was little tweaks done by Derek Wyatt and stuff that was like, nah, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have done that. So there was little changes artistically and verbally in that one. So if you want the true final version, get the complete one. And I don't know how much that's going to run you, but that's one way to go about it. And that's pretty much it. I want to assume that's pretty much it. Maybe there's going to be another post by me about this, but that's what it seems like would have been more of Season 4 and potentially Season 5. So let me know what you think, and let me know what you would have hoped for from some animated toys in the future, too, from what you've just heard just now.